Hi and welcome to this DCP Web Blender 2.8 Eevee Smoke and Fire Simulation. So in today's tutorial we're going to create a animation sequence, something similar to this, with fire and smoke and this text spinning. So we'll make something similar to this. We'll try and make something a little bit better, but let's try and do something. So like usual, the first thing we'll do is open up our web browser and we need to download a font. So I'm going to go to this website and I'm going to download the usual font. You can pick any font you like. I'm going to pick this one here. Click download. We'll drag that into this folder and extract it. And we'll delete the zip file and just rename this to font. We'll go inside and delete these files. So we're just left with our font files. Then we need to download a material for this font. So we're going to go to this other website. I'll put a link to this in the YouTube description. It's called freepbr.com, and we're going to click on metals here, and then we're going to pick one of these materials. I think today, as soon as it's fire, it might look good in gold, right? So let's do a gold one, or maybe a bronze one. This is actually copper. Let's just go with gold, and I'm going to click gold scuffed Unreal Engine. Click this one, download it. We'll drag that into here. We'll extract that as well, and we'll rename this to font material. So we've got the two things that we really need. Let's close this. Let's open up Blender. And we'll go to File, Save As, and we're in the correct folder already, so I'm just going to call this Smoke and Fire. Just give your file a sensible name, click Save. We'll click on the cube and delete it, so we'll hit the delete key. Then we'll press Shift and A, and we'll select plane here. So we've got this little floor, and we want to scale it up, so we're going to press S to scale. The letter S, and then we're going to type in 30, and that will scale it up. You can see it's scaled up by 30 here. You can see that on this particular floor. So let's zoom out a little bit, and we can use our middle mouse wheel to rotate. If you haven't used Blender before and you're not familiar with this software at all, then check the link in the YouTube description where I'll give you access to a beginner's tutorial, and it might be worth going through that first. So we want to, this is our floor, and we want to create a stage, right? So we need a backdrop here. So to do that, we're going to hit the tab key, or you can go to object and edit mode, or use the tab key. So we'll press tab, and then we want to do edge select. So we'll select the edge select option here, and we'll click on this edge here. We want to extrude it, so we're going to press E to extrude, and we're going to extrude it on the vertical axis, which is Z, and then we'll extrude that by 30 as well, so 30. So now we've got a stage, and now we've got a wall here. And we're going to click back on this same edge here. We'll move our mouse cursor to around here, and we'll press Control B to make a bevel, and we'll drag up to around here, and then we'll use our mouse wheel to create segments like this. And we'll left click to confirm. We'll press the tab key to go back into object mode here, and then we'll right click and say shade smooth. So it's going to make it nice and smooth. File, save. And then we'll press number 7. When we press number 7, we're into top orthographic. So we're looking at the top. Here's our light, here's our camera, and this is the backdrop with the wall at this top edge here. So let's zoom in a little bit, press Shift A, and we'll insert some text. So here's our text. Let's zoom in a bit more, and we'll press tab on our keyboard to edit the text. I'll type in DCP Web. You can type anything you like. We'll press tab again to go into object mode, and we'll click on the object data here. We'll go to the font, and we'll open up the folder, and we'll go into this font folder, and we downloaded the font, so we'll select this one here, and we'll click open, and it will change it to this font. And then we'll set the size to 4, so it's going to be quite large. Now we just want to see this little orange dot here. It might be a little bit hard to see. This is the what we call the the origin. So whenever we rotate this object, it's going to rotate around this point here. but we don't want that. We want it to rotate from the center. So we'll go to Object, Set Origin, Geometry to Origin. And what that will do is move the object to this center point here, you can see. So now it will rotate around this point, which is what we want. We need to now extrude. So we'll go to Geometry, and we're going to, it'll probably be easier. So if we middle mouse click and rotate around, we'll be able to see this a bit more clearly. And we're going to extrude to 0.15 here. And now we need to drag it up. So we can press the letter G on our keyboard to grab an object, and we're going to move it on the Z axis because we want to move it upwards. So we drag it up. The other way to do that, if I undo that, the other way to move an object is to click on the move tool here. And then you can see Z is here, right? This is the Z axis and it's highlighted blue. You can just drag it up by the handle as well. You can do it that way. But if you remember the shortcut G is to grab, and then you can either move it X, Y, Z. And you just need to look at this little cursor up here to work out which direction you want to move. We want to move it vertically, right? So let's just pan around to the front, and we want to rotate the object now. So we can use the rotation tool here. We can click on that, and you can then just rotate it in these different directions, however you want to rotate it. If you rotate it and you want to undo that, just press Ctrl Z and then Ctrl Z one more time, and that will bring it back to its original position. And we want to rotate it on the, if we move back to the move tool, click here. The easy way to rotate things is to press the letter R, but understand which direction you want to rotate it in first. So we want to rotate on the X axis along the width, right? Along the horizontal. So we press R, then X. So it's gonna, you can see the line goes red through this text, and then we're gonna rotate it 90 degrees. So if you remember them shortcuts, S to scale, R to rotate, and G to grab, get used to those shortcuts and that will help you a lot. So we can middle mouse click and rotate around, and we see our object is here now. And we want to press number 7 again. So number 7 takes us back into top view. Let's go to File, Save. And we want to make 3 copies of this text. So if we click on the drop down here, we'll see the different objects in our scene here right now. And we want to make 3 we want 3 of this text here. So let's click on the text here, and then we'll press Shift and the letter D to duplicate. So Shift D, and we'll hit the Enter key. Then we'll press Shift D one more time and hit the Enter key. So what we've done there is duplicated the object. So we've got 3 of them now. So we duplicated it twice, but they're all sitting in the exact same location. So let's click on the middle one, and we'll drag that back a little bit, and then we'll click on this bottom one here, and we'll drag that behind here as well. So this middle one, we want to click on it, and the extrusion, we want to set that right back down to 0.01, and we want to do the same with the back text, set that to 0.01. And here you can experiment, you can have them a little bit thicker, thinner, it's up to you, it's really your choice. Let's use the mouse wheel to zoom in. We'll click on the middle one and we'll drag it back. Let's click on the middle one, make sure you click on the middle one. When you click on these, so if I click on the middle one, it looks like this bottom one's selected, but it's not, it's whatever's highlighted in the icon here in orange, right? And we'll drag that down closer to this one, and then we'll click on the back text, and we'll drag that down closer to this one here, something like this, and we'll have them like this, stacked up together like this. We could probably move them a little bit closer, so press 7, and we'll drag this one back a little bit, and the middle one, we'll drag that in, something like this. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but similar. So let's zoom out a little bit, and what we'll do is click on this top text, and the top one is the front text. So let's call this text, just double click on the name here, and let's call it text front. And then this one here is going to be the text smoke and fire. And then the back one will be the text light. So these might change position because of the name. It's ordering it by the alphabetical name, but it doesn't matter. We just need to know what they are, so when we select them later, we know exactly what we're selecting. So we'll click on this top one, which is the front text, and we'll rotate around. And what we need to do is go to Object, convert it to a mesh here, because we want to unwrap this text later and then put a material on top of it, and we have to convert it to a mesh in order to do that. So the next thing we want to do is hit the tab key, or we want to go to object edit mode by hitting tab key. So when we hit the tab key, you will see it will look like this, and you can see it's a mesh object now, and we press the letter A to select this object, this front text, in edit mode. So we're in edit mode. We're going to go to mesh, clean up, and remove doubles, and what that does is it gets rid of any duplicate vertices. So if you look down here, you'll see there is 5012 vertices here. So when we go to mesh, clean up, and remove doubles, it will change to 2506. So it's half the amount. So anywhere on this mesh object where there is duplicate vertices, and a vertex is basically one of these little dots right in the corner here, each one is a vertex to make this mesh. We'll just clean up the doubles basically. So we'll press the tab key to go back into object mode, and we need to do the same for the smoke in the background. So we'll click on the smoke text here, and if we rotate around, it's a little bit hard to see because it's sitting in between the light and the front object. So to show it a bit clearer, we'll just hide the light object for now. So we just hide it. We'll click on the eye, this little eye icon on this light object here. That will just hide it from the scene. Then we can press the tab key. In fact, what we need to do is convert it first. So we need to be in object mode. Go to object, go to convert, and convert it to a mesh. Then we can press the tab key. Then we can press the letter A and go to mesh, clean up, remove doubles on this one as well. And then we'll press the tab key one more time, and then we'll turn the lights back on, or make it visible again. So let's turn that back on. And I've got a little typo in here. It should be lowercase I. Okay, let's rotate back around, file, save. And the first thing we want to do is get the material on this front text. So let's click on the front text here. We'll go to material here, and we'll give it a basic material. So click new. Now it has a basic material, and we're going to apply the material that we downloaded onto this object. To do that, we're going to go to the UV editing first, and we want to press the letter A to select this front text, all of the vertices, and then we'll press U to unwrap, and we'll do smart UV project here, smart UV project, and we'll click OK, and that will unwrap the text onto this UV map here. So it's just flattened out the text basically, that's what it's done. Then we can go to the shading here, and let's rotate around. You don't really need to do this, but what I'm going to do is just drag this up right close to the top here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Let's just drag this to the side, something like this. I'm just doing this so it's easier for you to see. And we're going to grab this output, put it right over here, and grab this, move it here, and we'll zoom in. So we'll go to my, let's just drag this down here. Let's go to my desktop, and then we'll go into this folder, and inside here we've got the font material. So we'll click there and click on scuffed gold, and then we can pick any of these two. They are both base materials. So I'm going to click this one, the one with a slightly darker color, drag that into the node editor, and if you read the name, it says base color boosted, and if you look over here it says base color. So all we're going to do is drag this and connect it to the base color here. That's all we're going to do. So that's that one done. This one here is the metallic. So if I drag it here, you'll see it's called scuffed gold metallic. So the only one that has color data is the base color, this one. The other ones we're going to set to non-color data, and we're going to grab the color and drag it to the metallic here. Now you can start to see it's looking a bit like the gold material, right? Then we've got the roughness here. So let's drag this to here. Let's drag this back a bit. This one is the roughness. Let's just check roughness. We'll drag that here. It's called roughness here. So we'll go to non-color data and drag the color to the roughness. And sometimes you need to move this a little bit to see it clearly, you can see like it's looking a bit scratched and looking like gold, but scratched gold, because that's what it was called, right? It was called scuffed gold. And now we've got the height map. So if we drag this is called the normal map. It's called normal here, and you'll see normal written down here. So you can drag this straight here, but you don't really want to do that. You want to put something in between so you can play around with the height of these little bumps and dents. So you see here, you'll see these little bumps and dents come through. So we want to create a bump map. So here we'll go to vector bump. We'll put that here. We'll drag the color to the height because we want to affect the height. And we'll set it to non-color data. Non-color data here. And grab the normal and plug the normal into here. And you can see it looks a bit washed out, so you just need to move it slightly, and then you'll see these little dents in the metal here, and then you can change the strength of them. So we want to show them through a little bit, maybe set it around halfway, something like this. And then you can see if we just drag this down, it's looking like this gold material. And if you go to the shading here and click on this little ball, you can select these other types of HDRI maps, right? So you can see what it looks like in different types of scenes. This is quite a dark scene, but it's got lights in it. You can see what the material looks like in that scene, and you can play around and see what the material looks like depending on the scene itself. So we're going to implement a HDRI map as well on our final render. But when you go back to layout here, and if you click on the render view over here, you'll see it won't look the same. It just won't have all that shininess and stuff because we don't have a HDRI lighting set up yet, but we will do that. So that's the front of the text done, let's say. Now we want to create the smoke, right? And normally I do this in wireframe. So if we click on wireframe, we'll just see this basic wireframe. And we want to go to this text smoke here. So click on that, and that's going to be the object sitting in the back, right? And we want to go to object, quick effects, and we want to do quick smoke here. And when we click the play button, we'll see the smoke coming out now, like this. And if we go to the smoke domain here and go to the physics, let's see, the resolution for now we're going to set it to 60, and then we're going to click on the text here, text smoke and fire, this text, and we're going to go to this physics here and set it to fire and smoke here, fire and smoke, and we'll just go file save and click play. Now we're going to have a combination of fire and smoke. But what we need to do is set the domain. So if you look at this orange, when I click on this orange box, the fire and smoke will only be rendered within the realms of this box. And we want to make the box bigger because we want to see more of this fire and smoke when we animate the text object. So the smart thing for us to do is let's first of all press number 7. So we go into the top view and let's click on the plane. So we can see the plane here, and we want to stretch it out on the width. We just want to make it a bit wider. So to do that, we want to press S to scale, and we want to scale it on the x-axis, right? On the width. So we press S and then X and scale it out to make it wider, like about this wide. Something like this, much wider. And then we can pan back down here, and what we want to do is sort out the camera. You can see the camera is right here, but we want the camera to see what we can see in terms of this text here. So to do that, all we're going to do is press the Control, the Alt key, and hit number 0. So Control, Alt, and 0 will move the camera. So the camera's moved from that original position to what we can see. So if you were to press number 7 again and zoom out a little bit, you can see the camera's here looking at the text now. And if we press 0 on our keyboard, that will show us what the camera sees. Now we can adjust the camera to get the text really roughly where we want it, right? So let's click on the camera here and we press N on our keyboard, the letter N, and we can manipulate the camera here, right? The location, Y, so we can move it backwards and forwards. We're going to move it backwards a bit. We're going to move the camera up a little bit on the Z axis, and we want to move it out a little bit. And maybe what we'll do is go to the camera here, and the focal length, we'll reduce that to maybe 45mm, and that just gives us a bit more of a wider angle, right? Maybe we can even reduce it a bit more to like 40, something like 40. Here, 40. So let's move the camera up a little bit. We want to get it up to around here. So there's some space at the top because we want our flames to fly upwards, right? Maybe it's a little bit too high, something like this. And let's file save, and we'll press F12 just to do a basic render. So this is where our text will be, and it's going to spin around, and our flames are going to be coming off the top here, right? So we can see what the camera sees, this box. And what we want to do is click on the smoke domain. So let's click on the smoke domain, and imagine this box is what the camera sees, and the smoke domain is going to stop here. So we want to increase the height of the smoke domain so that it moves outside of the camera view, because we want the flames and the smoke to fly off of the frame at the top here, right? So to do that, let's press think about it, right? So we want to press S on our keyboard and scale it on the Z axis. So press S and then Z, and we'll scale it up to something like this. Now the problem is the smoke domain starts at the bottom here. So to fix that, we're going to press number 3 on our keyboard, and that takes us to the right view, the right orthographic. And then we can just, we already got the move tool here selected, so we can just drag it up so that it sits above this green line. This is like the floor. So if we middle mouse click and pan back around, we'll see the smoke here, or the text here, and the domain is here now. And if we press 0 on our keyboard, that will take us back into the camera view. And now you can see, if we press play, let's go back to the first frame, like the flames are going to touch the top of this frame and the smoke will flow out, right? And we can adjust how much flame and how much smoke we have later. The other thing we want to do really is change the width of this domain, because when we rotate around, we want the flames to like render at the side here as well. So let's press S on our keyboard, and we're going to scale it on the X axis this time. So S and then X, and we scale it out on the width, and make sure it goes wider than what the camera can see here. So you won't really notice this when you play, but when we spin the text around, the smoke's going to get pushed out from the side. So we want to make sure we see all of that. So we can stop on like frame, it doesn't really matter what frame it is. Let's stop on frame 68 and press F12. And we won't see any smoke in here at the moment, or any flames. So to get the smoke and flames working in the render view, so we can go into these different views. We've got the wireframe, we've got the solid view, we've got the look dev view, and then we've got the render view. So to see the smoke in the render view, we need to go to the smoke domain and click on material here, and then we need to set the surface to principled volume here. If we go back to the first frame and play, let's actually, we've got to save this. To see the smoke actually in the render, we have to bake the frames temporarily, yeah? So what we will do is we'll set the end frame here temporarily to 120. So we'll set it to 120 frames. Let's file save, and then we'll click on the smoke domain, and just as an example, we'll go to the physics here, and we'll go to the cache, and we have to cache this smoke domain before we can render it. So to do that, what we'll do is set this to 120 frames. Just for now, we'll click bake. It's going to bake those frames. Now when we play it, we should be able to see this. Okay, the one thing we're missing, let's go back to the first frame. Let's go to the render here, and we need to turn on volumetrics here. If we don't turn that on, we won't see it. Now we can see the smoke. We can see the smoke, but we can't really see the flames. So when we render it, we see a lot of smoke. The flames are there, but they're not visible at the moment. So we need to make sure volumetrics is turned on, and we'll adjust these settings in a moment. When we start to do the render at the end, we need to adjust these settings. We should turn on shadows as well, and we'll adjust this to get the smoke and flames looking better later. So at least now we can see the smoke in the render, right? That's what we wanted to see. Now, really what we should do is set up our HDRI lighting. I think that's the next thing we should do. Let's go to File, Save, and we'll go to the world view here. We'll click on the world here, and we'll click Use Nodes. And then we need to go to Shading here. So we're back into our shader. And here in the object, we want to select World. And here we've got two settings. We've got the background and we've got the surface here. So we want to click on the background and delete it. Then we want to press Shift A. And we want to insert a texture, environmental texture here. So click and select that. And we kind of need to decide what environment. You can see it's quite dark here. So when we click on this shading and click here, depending on what environmental texture we select, we're going to get different types of reflections off of our text here. So that's going to affect quite a lot. So if it's something quite dark, let's try a dark one, right? We can experiment with this. You know, sometimes it's about experimenting and finding out what works best. So we need to go to this website called HDR. We need to go to this website. I'll put a link to this website. It's called hdrihaven.com. I'm going to make a little note of that to put a link to this. And here we can download these HDRI maps. So HDRI, high definition, what is it? HDR, high definition resolution image, I believe. Let's just double check that before I talk bollocks. Let's have a look. High dynamic range imaging. That's it, sorry. High dynamic range imaging. That's what it stands for. Let's click Browse All 200, and in here we can see all these different examples, right? This is a new one, so let's try this new one out. Seeing as it's new, let's click on it, and it's got all of this like Incredible Hulk, I think this looks like, and it's got these red lights and stuff like this. And we'll click on the 4K 24 megabytes. We'll let that download. We'll drag and drop it into this folder. In fact, not this folder. We want to drag and drop it into the root here, on the root here. Or you can make another folder and put them in there if you want. Maybe we should do that, right? So let's make a folder, call it HDRI, and then drag that into this folder. Keep our folders clean. And let's take that one, and then we'll take one more. So let's do something with like maybe this museum one, and we'll download the 24 meg one of that. We'll drag that into this same folder, and there's one more I want something quite dark. So we'll see which one of these three looks the best. So let's go to skies here, and we want something quite dark, right? So let's try this one. It's got a bit of color in it as well, so it might look good. This one might look better. Let's click on this one here, and we'll download the 4K version of this. and we'll drag and drop that. So we've got 3 different ones, and we can pick more later. We can change them, we can do whatever we want, but for now we'll play with these 3 and see what they look like. So we'll go back to Blender, and in here we're going to click open, and we'll go to this HDRI, and first one we select is the gym one. Let's open it and then drag and this to the volume, I believe. No, to the surface. And if we go to our render view, let's drag it to surface. Here we can now see, if we zoom out a little bit, that's the environment, right? Let's zoom out a little bit more. So here you can see the environment. So all of this, all of the lighting coming off of these like little things here, off of the roof, wherever it is getting reflected against this surface of the text. So you can see there's a lot of red and different colors in there. Really the floor, we should give that a material as well, right? So if we click on the, if we click here and go to the plane, click on plane here, and then go to material and click new material, then we can set the material color to something dark like this. This light here, we can get rid of it. So let's click on the light here and delete it for now. Let's click it and delete. And what we'll do is quickly go back to layout here and go back to the first frame. So let's just right click here and go to the first frame. So we get rid of the smoke and stuff. We can just see what the actual environment looks like. So we'll go back to shading, and do we like that? Don't we like that? And we can play around with the surface as well. So we can click on plane and we can change the roughness. And when we change the roughness, see if we put the roughness right down, it's very shiny, you could say almost. And you can see it's reflecting all of the environment around it off of this floor. But we don't really want that. We want it to be a bit more rough. Something like this, where you can't really recognize what is on the floor, but you're getting some of the lighting shining off of it. And the specular, let's see here. Really, one thing we want to do is go back to the render settings here and do screen space reflection, because then you can get the reflections. So the light is hitting this text and then it's reflecting over the floor, right? If you get the right angle, and we can set the viewport samples to 120. That will just smooth out the render in here to see it a bit better, and we can set the render samples to 120 for now as well. And then we'll be able to see what this looks like. If we, when we're in this environment, well, this top section up here, we can press 0 and we can see what the camera sees, and then press F12, and then we can decide whether we like that color scheme or whether we want to change it. So I think we'll change that. So all we do is click on the open image, and we'll select this night image here and click open, and then we'll see a different type of render here, right? Now it's looking more like the gold that we originally wanted. If we press 0, we can see what it looks like, right? Let's F12 and render that. Now it's much more of a darker scene, and the text is looking more like the metallic gold. Let's try the last one, open it, and it was the museum one. Let's click open on that one, and then this one's got a lot more colors going on, right? So I think this one is probably looking the best out of a lot of them. So it's down to you what you want to do. The camera angle will affect how this text looks as well. We could probably move that text closer to the floor. So let's just go back into our layout. And in our layout, we've got this HDR map set up now, so we can really see what the text looks like, going to look like. I'm going to bring that a bit closer to the floor, I think. So to do that, let's be a bit careful here. So let's do one thing. We'll press the letter N to get rid of that little side widget. And we want to almost like group these texts together, so when we animate it afterwards, all 3 of the elements will move in sync. So it's called parenting. and we want to make the front text the parent and the other two texts that sit behind it part of that parent group. So we'll click on the smoke and fire first, then we'll hold down the shift key and click on the light, and then we'll click on the front text last. And then we'll move to the viewport and we'll press Ctrl P, and then we'll click object here. Now, whatever we do to this front text, if we move it up or down, is going to move the other objects with it. That's quite important. So we want to really decide where do we want this text. So let's just rotate around and let's just drag it down a little bit so it's closer to the floor. Something like this, maybe a little bit higher. And then we can press 0 on our keyboard and see what the camera sees. So let's zoom in a little bit. That's what the camera is going to see, right? And maybe we need to move that camera down a little bit. So let's click on the camera. Let's go to the object data here, and we want to move it on the y-axis, right? Move it in a little bit, and then Z to move it down. Let's rotate it. So we want to rotate it upwards. So rotate on the x-axis, and then Z to move it down. So something like this. Let's press F12 to render that out. And that's what our text is going to look like. After we render it, we'll set it slightly higher and get a better effect out of it. We can turn on bloom, but bloom isn't really going to do much until we add the light source. So if we click on the light text here, text light, or yeah, text the light, that's sitting in the middle. So let's go to the material and go new, and this one we'll set to emission, and let's change it to like a yellow sort of color. And if we increase the emission to around 6, something like this, and then render it, we'll get this like yellow glow around the edge of the text. You can pick any color you like, it doesn't have to be yellow. I'm going to stick with that. Go to file, save. Let's just click the play button. We can see the smoke being emitted here. And one thing we need to do is pause it. Let's go and press 0 on our keyboard and press number. We need to go back to the wireframe view and press number 7. That takes us to the top view, and on this smoke domain we need to click it and we need to make it much bigger. But to judge how big we want it to be, we need to rotate this text. So let's click on the front text, go to its object data, and we want to rotate it on the Z axis. So rotation Z, we want to set it to, I think, 90. Yeah, we want to set it to 90 like this. Then click on the smoke domain, and we want our smoke domain to be a little bit bigger than the height of this text. So we want to scale it on the y-axis. So we press S to scale, and then press Y to scale it up, and we're going to scale it so it sits outside of this text, because we're going to rotate this text, right? So if we rotate the text, let's go back to the front text, and when we rotate it, not this way, on the Z-axis, we want to make sure that the domain, smoke domain, has enough space for this text. So let's set the text back to 0 on the Z-axis. That brings it back to the front, and then we can see the smoke domain will be big enough for this text to rotate around and generate the smoke, because it was too narrow before. Let's zoom out a little bit and see where this is all sitting. So this looks okay. The one thing we want to do really is move the domain and the smoke text back a bit. So let's click on the front text here and shift click. Holding down the shift key, we'll click on the smoke domain as well. And we want to drag them back. So we can press number 7. Actually, we'll leave it in this view, it's a bit easier to see. And we want to drag it back to around here. So it's closer to this wall, but not too close. Something like this, right? Just before it starts to curve. Then we can press 0 That takes us back to the camera view, and we'll press here to go back to the render view, and this box is showing us what we're going to see. So let's press F12, and we can see the floor here, and we can see the text here. I think that's looking okay. Maybe we can bring the camera down a little bit. So let's click on the camera. On the Z-axis, we'll move it upwards, which will bring the text down, right? To somewhere like here. Let's press F12. That should be okay. That looks good. Everything's nice. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is click on the smoke domain here. And let's click on the material here. And in the material, we want to set the surface to none. So make sure the surface is set to none here. And then make sure the volume is set to principled volume here. And then make sure use nodes is selected. It will be highlighted blue. So it should go blue like this. Then we want to move our mouse cursor up to here. So next to the word shading, we just want to move our mouse so it turns into this like X shape. And we drag down so we can make two windows here. And over here we'll click and go to shader editor. And inside here we can see, let's just grab this. Inside here, make sure you've got object selected here, not world, object, and then make sure you've clicked on the smoke domain here, and then you can see this principled volume is connected to the volume here like this, and you can see that volume here is got principled volume and there's none connected to the surface. So if you were to go surface and click principled volume, then it would add a node here connected to the surface, but we don't need that, so we can delete this. If we click play, we'll see like the smoke here, right? And the smoke and the fire mixed together. The flame and the smoke are mixed together on the same shade, the same color, so it doesn't look very good. So we want to separate the flame from the fire, from the smoke, sorry. So to do that, we're going to press Shift A, and we're going to add a shader. So SHA, let's do shader. So we're going to click add. So sometimes when you're looking for things, you press Shift A, and then in this search box, click, and then you can type what you're looking for. We're going to add shader, SHAD, and we're going to click add shader, and we'll click and drag it here. And then this volume will connect to this shader, and then the shader here will connect it to the volume here. Then over on this side, we're going to do some work. So we want to do a attribute. So if we look at the smoke domain and look at the, if we click on the text smoke here and click on the, click here, we should see flame here written here, right? Flame rate. So we go back to the smoke domain. We want to press Shift A, and then we want to input an attribute, and we want to target the flame. So we're going to type in FLAME here, flame. So make sure you type in flame here, flame, and then we'll press Shift A, and we want to put in a color ramp, COLO, color ramp here, and we'll connect the factor to this factor, and we'll connect the color to this shader here. Now we can set the color attribute here, the color here, to a much darker color. So we want to set it to something not black, but like a dark gray. So set this color attribute to a dark gray, and that will be the color of the smoke. And then if we click here on this white, this is like a little handle that you can grab. If we click on the white one here, we'll drag it across a little bit. Let's drag it to about here, and then click on this swatch down here, and we'll change that to like a red color. Now the fire will be red, or the flames will be red, and the smoke will be this like black color. And then we can add another one. So let's add one, and we've got this one in here that we just added, and we'll click here again, and we'll change it to sort of like a yellow color. You can see what it's doing to that, the flame and the smokes here. And when we click on here, we can change the alpha as well, so we can make it a bit more transparent to something like this. And this red one, Let's make that one a bit more transparent as well. And then over here, we'll click here and we'll click the plus sign. And then this one will change to like a light blue sort of color. So we'll have like light blue around the edge, then red, and then this sort of yellowy sort of color. You can adjust these and play around with them, and you can have some with colors, some without. You can change the alphas, so you can change the strength of what that blue will look like. You can bring it right down. You can play around with these settings and get the smoke to look whatever you want, so you can change the actual attributes of the smoke color itself, right? You can play around with these settings and get it to what you like. And just by switching them around, so if you drag the red across here, drag the yellow down here, if you move the blue, you'll see it will affect the color of the smoke. So the red's more prominent now, right? It's on the outside edge. So you can imagine the one that's closest to this black here will be on the outside, and then you're working your way inside. So we'll leave the red sort of here. We'll put the blue out on the edge here. And let's put the red over this side. To something like this. Now it doesn't look so impressive because it's at a very low resolution. So when we increase the resolution, it will look a lot better. I'm going to adjust this a bit more. And we might add one more color in here, something like an orange sort of color. You can play around with this. You can make the smoke whatever colors you prefer. Maybe on this blue one, let's just pause it on a frame. We'll render it. We're going to set this up to a much higher resolution, so it will look a lot clearer once we've rendered it out. But you can play around with these settings, make the smoke whatever you want. If you want to change the color, that's the fire or the flame. If you want to change the color of the smoke, you can click up here, and this will affect the smoke color up here. It should change it to green, or you can see if we change it to pink sort of color, it will change it to that fade, that shade. So you don't want to go too crazy here. Normally smoke is like quite dark grey, so we'll make that like almost like a black grey color. And it might be worth us when we render, we want to set this to like a 2 for a higher resolution. We'll change these settings shortly, but for now we'll just leave it like this. Really, the shadow samples we should set to something like 40. And this will help our smoke look a lot more better in terms of it when we render it out. It will just look a lot better. The samples here, let's try and set them to around 120 for the minute. And we'll have to ramp this up afterwards. Let's try 300. But when you start putting it at a high sample rate, it's going to slow right down, yeah? So right now we're just trying to judge what our colors will look like. So if we pause this, and then set the sample rates lower to something like 60, it will play a lot smoother, so we can actually do our work, and then we'll set these higher when we go to render afterwards. But the smoke shadows you can set to around 40 for now. That should be fine. So I'm going to stick with this sort of color scheme. I might tweak it a little bit, but you can play around with these settings. You can set the strength to them. The alpha will kind of make it a bit more transparent. It's down for you to now go and experiment with them and see what you like. Maybe we'll boost these colors up a bit. think something like that will look okay. So you can play around with these settings. I'll just click on them to show you what they're set to. So this one's set to this, so you can pause it and set yours like this if you want. The yellow, or this like orangey yellow, maybe I'll make it a bit more orange. Those are the settings for that one. This is the settings for the yellow here. This is the settings for the red. But it's down to you. You can play around and experiment with this. So really we've got the smoke and the fire done now, and it's rendering in the full render here, right, in the render view. So let's just pause this a second. We'll move our mouse cursor to in between these two screens. Let's see, where is it? Right here. We'll right click and say join area, and we'll join it to the top, and then we'll have our full screen again. We can press 0 to see what the camera sees. So this is the camera box here. You can zoom in a little bit, and let's try and adjust this floor slightly. So we'll go to the plane here, and really how much of this scene do we want reflected. Something like this should be okay. So we leave it like this. We can turn on like ambient inclusion, subsurface scattering. That will improve it as well. And then we want to go to the smoke domain. We want to go to the smoke physics. Let's just check on this smoke text fire. What we want to do on this one is set the surface right down. So let's bring the surface down. Let's set it down to like 0.5 for now. We'll go back to the smoke domain, and on the dissolve, let's unbake this, right? So we have to free the bake, and then set the dissolve to around 50. Let's go back to the first frame, bake it. Let's go back to the first frame, play. So let's free the bake, and let's set this time to maybe, let's set it lower. We might have to rebake it to see it, so let's rebake. These flames are quite high, right? So let's go to the smoke and fire. Let's try and reduce the flame rate to about half, and let's go back to the smoke domain, free the bake. Let's go back to the first frame. We need to adjust the settings to get the smoke and fire exactly what these flames are a bit high, right? So let's try and adjust let's go to the smoke and fire here, and its density, let's reduce that. So this flame rate is going to affect how high that flame travels, how high up. So let's make it a bit more. A bit more than that. I think something like this will be okay. And then we want to set initial velocity as well. And I think that's about all we want to do here for now. Let's pause it and go back to the first frame and play. I think that will be okay. And then let's go back to the first frame. Let's go to the text front here. We'll click on that, and then let's see. We want to rotate this text, right? So we want to set our frames. Let's set the frames to around, the end frame we set to 160. And then let's make sure we go to the smoke domain and set the end frame here to 160 underneath the physics, so they're matching. Then on the first frame we'll click on the text front and we want to rotate this, so let's press the record button, we'll press I and insert a location, rotation and scale, and then we'll move to frame 60, and then we'll press the letter I again to insert a location, rotation and scale, and this time we'll click on the text front, we'll go to the object data here, and we want to rotate it on the z-axis 360 degrees. So if we reverse and if we go back to the first frame, untick the record, click the play button, we'll see it rotate around like this. And let's go back to the smoke and text here and the settings here. I think we need to increase the flame rate. Let's set it a bit higher, so like 0.9. And the source, let's try and set that to 2. And the surface, let's increase that. So I'll set the source to 4 here, and then the surface to 0.655 here, and then the flame rate to 0.9. So I think that would be okay. Again, you can play around with these settings and see what works for you. I think that's going to be okay. So let's pause this, go back to the first frame, and on the flame rate, so we're going to press the record button. On the flame rate, we want to set this to an iframe, so press the letter I, hover over it and press the letter I, and that'll put in a keyframe for this particular flame rate. And we want to set one on the density as well, so press the letter I on this one, and then on the surface as well, press the letter I. So we want to set a keyframe on all of these here, these three. And as we scrub across, we'll get to 60, and then we will just want to press the letter I on here, hover over I and I here as well, and then we'll get to frame 70, and we'll do the same again, I and I here, and then on frame, let's see, 70 to 100, on frame 100 we'll press the letter I here and set the surface all the way down to 0.5. The density, we'll press I and set that down to 0, and then the flame rate, press the letter I and set that down to 0, and then we'll click the record button. Let's press play. That probably fades out too quickly, right? Between 70 and 100. So let's just click here on this frame, iframe, or the keyframe, and move it to 120 here. Let's go back and play. I think that's going to be okay. Again, it's down to experimenting and seeing what's going to work, and let's just do a test render. Okay, we need to bake this first. So let's just assume that's going to be okay for us. And while this is spinning, I want to set the camera to move, right? So I'm going to click on the camera, click on the record button, move into the screen here, press the letter I to insert a location, rotation and scale. And then on the last frame over here, I'm going to press the letter I again to insert a location, rotation and scale for the camera. And then the camera, I'm going to go to the object data here, and I'm going to move it on the Z-axis down, and on the Y-axis I want to move it in. So I'm just moving the Z and the Y to bring that text in. I want it to be quite large when it gets, I want it to be really centered, right? To like somewhere like here. We'll untick the record button, go back to the first frame and play it. So as this is spinning, as the fire and everything is getting generated, it's going to do this sort of effect, right? So we've got 160 frames. Let's pause it. Let's go back to the first frame. Let's save this. We'll click on the smoke domain. We'll go to the smoke domain settings, and in the resolution, we're going to set it to 120. So set this resolution to 120. Scroll down and click on high resolution here, and set that to 2. And then we need to click bake all dynamics, and this is going to take a fair bit of time to do this. So let's click, let's file save first, file save, and then click bake all dynamics. And now this is going to take probably about 5 minutes to bake, so I'm going to pause the video and we'll come back once it's finished baking. Okay, so Blender's finished baking all of the smoke dynamics. It took quite a while to do that, about 10 minutes. So if we click the play button, we'll notice that Blender is going to play it very slow in the viewport, but our smoke dynamics and our effects are going to be at a much higher resolution. So let's pause this and go back to the first frame. Let's go to file save, and now we want to render out our frames. Before we do that, let's go to the render settings here, and let's make sure ambient inclusion, bloom, subsurface scattering, screen space reflections and volumetric are all turned on. On the volumetric lighting, underneath volumetrics here, the samples, we want to set it to around 100. Let's set it to 120. You don't want to set it too high, because if you set it too high, Blender might crash. Depending on your machine, if you've got quite a powerful machine, then you can probably set it anything up to 250 here. And then the shadow samples, I'm going to set this to 60. So we'll click file save, and then we want to go to the output here. And in output, we're going to leave everything default, but we're going to select 16-bit here, and then we'll go to the output folder, go to my desktop, go to the project here, we'll create a new folder called frames, and we'll click accept, and then all we need to do is press Control and F12, and we'll see Blender will start rendering out each frame, and this will take quite some time to do as well. So I'll pause the video while this is rendering, and this will take a fair amount of time, maybe 15-20 minutes, to render out all of the 140 frames we had. So we'll pause it here, and once it's already rendered, you can see it's done one frame. It takes a little bit of time to start up, so be patient, because it needs to calculate everything and then make sure, and you can see that it's rendering 120 samples for each one of the frames. And once it gets to 120, it will finish off one frame, and each frame is roughly around 20 seconds, I would say. Let's see. Yeah, it's roughly around 20 seconds. So we'll pause this and we'll come back once it's finished rendering all the frames. Okay, so Blender's finished rendering out all of the frames, all 160 frames. This is the last frame here. We'll close this, and we'll close this folder here. We don't need that. And let's just go to our project. We'll go into frames, and we just need to make sure we see all 160 frames clear in here. So we'll just wait for it to buffer. While it's doing that, we can click on a frame and see what it looks like. Just make sure it's clear. Looks okay. So these are all the 160 frames. Each one is correct. There's no black frames in here. So we'll go back to Blender. We'll go to File, Save, and then we'll click on this option here to change the current view, and we'll send it to the video sequencer here. We'll go Add Image Sequence here. Then we'll click on the frames, and we need to select all 160 frames. Make sure you select all 160. After you click Add Image Strip, you should see 160 here, or how many ever frames your animation was. We'll go to the Preview and Sequencer here, and just scrub a few frames. We can see the flames coming out, that's fine. So now we just need to convert this into a video. So we'll go back to our output settings here. We'll click on AVI RAW, and we'll render it out as RGB into the same folder. So all we have to do is press Ctrl and F12, and that's going to take each frame and render it out into the video. So this will take a little bit of time, a few minutes, so I'll pause the video and come back and we'll check it. Okay, so Blender's finished sequencing all of the frames into a video clip. It's on 160, so it's done all the frames into a video sequence. We'll close this. We'll go back to here and select 3D viewport. We'll go File, Save. Now we can close down Blender and we can check our video clip. So let's go into here, into frames. I rendered that into the same folder. We'll open it and we can watch this a few times and see what we think. So this is our end result. I think it came out pretty well. The flames look quite good, and I like the effect it has when it's spinning. It affects the flames, right? The velocity of the movement is affecting how the flames are rendered. So it looks pretty cool. I don't know what you think. Maybe your one came out a bit different. You can experiment with the colors of the flames using that color ramp. You can play around with this now and make any sort of fire. It doesn't have to be text as well. It could be any object. You know how to create the flames out of it now and the smoke. So hope you find this tutorial useful. I find it quite fun to make this little flame sequence here. It was a little tricky to understand how to do this, but the render come out pretty well. So we've done quite a few different examples now. We've done flames, we've done smoke, we've done particles. Probably one of the last tutorials I'll do on Blender is we're going to look at fluids. So how we can have water or motion or drops of water, and how we can do that in Blender as well. So this one came out pretty well. We'll close this down, and that's the end of this tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you on the next DCP web tutorial.